Yesterday we worked on functions. We were talking about how a function is a special type of relation between a domain and a range, or input and output. We said that in order for a relation to be a function, every input could only have just one output. We looked at representations of functions in the form of mapping, a table of values. We looked at ordered pairs, and then we did the vertical line test when we looked at graphs. There was one last thing I wanted to discuss in our introduction of functions. We'll be doing much more with functions later on in the year, but in this introduction, we talked about what is a function and how we're going to apply that. We can set up a table of values to find different values of a function, but instead we're going to do it with just isolated values. If we're given an equation like y is equal to 2x minus 4, we can write that in what we call function notation. In function notation, we're going to be replacing y with f of x. This x represents the elements of the domain, and f of x represents the elements of the range. If we want to find the range value that corresponds with the domain value or element of 5, you would take out the x and put 5 in its place. This is read f at 5. So we're going to replace it in the rule or the function, multiply, subtract, and we find out that when we replace x, remember x's and y's, if we input 5, we're going to output 6. We're giving you a domain of 5 to get a range of 6. It's basically just asking us to evaluate at a particular point. F at 2 would tell us to take this function here, replace x with 2, and then simplify what's on the right. I'm not worried about what's on the left, that's just stating the element that we're looking at. So we're going to get negative 6 plus 5, which gives me an output of negative 1. When I input 2, I output negative 1. Let's try inputting negative 3. Let's find the value of this function when we input negative 3. So our rule says to multiply by negative 3 and then add 5. Well, negative 3 times negative 3 is 9, and 9 plus 5 is 14. So when we input negative 3, we'll output 14. What happens when we input 0 into this function? We're going to get negative 3 times 0 plus 5. So when we input 0, we will output 5. Our domain, again, is our x values. So we think about our x values. We want to be very familiar with these words. The x value is your domain or your input. What are you inputting? What are the x values we're going to substitute in? And our y value, in this case our f of x, is going to be my range values or my output. You want to get very comfortable with this vocabulary. I'll be repeating it many times. Let's try another function. In my new rule, my function says y, or f of x, is equal to 2x minus 3. So let's evaluate and find the value when f is equal to 2, x is equal to 2. That's 2 times 2 minus 3. 4 minus 3 is 1. When we input 2, we'll output 1. My second one says, let's take that same rule and let's find the value when we input 5. That's going to give me 10 minus 3, which is 7. So when you input a value of 5, your output will be 7. One last one. Let's do this time with -4. -4 times 2 is -8. -8 minus 3, add the opposite, will give me -11. When I input -4, my output is -11. Again, we could do a whole table of values, but now we're just being asked for one or two particular input values. Sometimes, instead of just having to the first degree or linear, you may have something to second degree or quadratic. We'll do the same process. We're going to take 4, and this time we're going to square it. Well, 4 squared, 4 times 4 is 16, plus 3 will give me 19. So that when I input 4, my output is 19. If I take a value of x to be 6, 6 squared plus 3, that gives me 36 plus 3, which is 39. So when you input 6, your output will be 39. What if we took -2 and squared it and then add 3? We're just following the rule. And when we follow this rule, when I input -2, my output is 7. So again, functions show that a relation between my domain and my range, and it tells me that every input or every domain value can only have one output or one range value. You'll do a little more practice with relations and functions for homework, and we're looking at a possible quiz at the end of the week. See you in class.